Hey, this is Brent Jensen. You're listening to No Sleep Till Sudbury, the show where we talk about the music that makes your skin vibrate. Brought to you by Pariah Pickups, quality handcrafted guitar pickups in Detroit City. Check them out at pariahpickups.com. This week, my guest is radio personality, musician, and host of the Jeremy White podcast, Mr. Jeremy White. This chat was a lot of fun for me. Jeremy is a real deal music fan, loves Van Halen, loves Mutt Lange, and the conversation's my favorite kind. Loose and laid back. Check it out. Jeremy, thanks for taking the time today, man. I appreciate it. How you doing?
I'm super stoked. First of all, you sound just like Bob's Burgers and Archer, and it's totally throwing me off. So,
Are you getting hungry?
Yeah, and dude, have you ever watched Archer, like the TV show Archer?
No, I don't even know what that is.
So it's the same guy. It's the same voice guy as Bob Burgers, but he has his voice is almost just like yours.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, dude, if I could pull up a clip of Archer, you would actually die because you sound just like him.
Oh, man. Send that to me. Now I'm curious.
Hold on 1 second. I'm pulling up a freaking clip of Archer right now so you can hear it because this is ridiculous. Archer's it's an animated show.
Okay.
Cartoon Network and I think it was on Cartoon Network, but it's on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. So
he's like a secret agent that works for ISIS, and they're always combating terrorism and stuff. So hold on, here you go. What's this? Here we go. Here's some Archer.
It's good to have you back on mission.
Yes. I mean, no, not yet. Look, I know you've been ducking me, so I need to tell you something now before you bail.
Is that you? Is that you? Or is that you? Come on.
I don't know, man. My voice sounds different inside my head, so I don't know.
Come on, Brett. You know you sound just like that. And so, dude, you're so Archer. I'm just gonna call you Archer.
All right, done. I like it, Archer.
Oh man! All right, where were we? We're already off the rails. I love it.
We are. I follow you on YouTube, social media. I think what you're doing is great. Your Jeremy White podcast. I think you're at episode 20. You just got started in August. You've had some great chats with some very interesting guests. You've had Gene Simmons and Ace Frehley from Kiss. You've had Steve Lukather, Rob Halford, Steve Stevens. You've also had the nicest guy in rock and roll, Def Leppard's Phil Collin.
Yeah.
And fantastic interviews. You've done a really good job. They're super compelling. So you're off to a great start, man. Congrats.
Thanks. I appreciate that. It's funny. So when I started this podcast, let me give you some backstory on the podcast. So I've been wanting to start a podcast for 2 years or something where I could just basically do things that I can't do on the radio station that I'm on. So I'm on Montreal's #1 music station, and it's a female targeted, hot AC 80s 90s today kind of turn up the feel good. What's up? New survey says brand helped you poop better. That detail's coming up in 5. It's that kind of radio station.
Okay.
So growing up, loving all kinds of different styles of music and genres, I really just wanted to start interviewing the people that I grew up loving.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also not what the podcast was supposed to be. It wasn't just going to be an interview show. It just kind of turned into what it is, organically.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wanted it to be sort of morning show style radio, but on a podcast. And, I was going to have a co-host and stuff. And then we started looking at all the ideas. I have a couple of really good friends of mine that are act as my consultants. We just said, you know what? Why don't we just stick to interviews for now and see what happens?
Yeah.
I didn't have any guests lined up at all. I met Steve Stevens last summer when Billy Idol and Bryan Adams were on tour.
Okay.
We met backstage thanks to my friend Mitch LaFawn. And we followed each other on Instagram, and I just DM'd him one afternoon. I was like, hey, Steve, listen, I'm starting this podcast, and I really need a first guest, and I would love for you to be my first guest. And he was like, sure, yeah, let's do it, man.
That's great.
No hesitation at all. Just said, let's do it. And it went from there. I was going week by week, trying to get another guest. The second guest was Aldo Nova, which was kind of hilarious. He lives about 45 minutes from me. We drove over to his house and recorded in his studio. And
wow.
But also with the pandemic and everything, I was really hesitant to start a podcast because ever since the lockdown, every Tom, Dick, and Harry and his auntie have started a podcast or a live stream. And it's the market is just so saturated now. I didn't want to just be one of those oh, here's another podcast kind of thing. So when I was deciding to launch this, I really did. It really is a culmination of everything I've learned in radio, So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do the videos. I'm going to make sure it looks good. if you look at the radio station I work on, all of our like branding and stuff is really, really top notch.
Mm-hmm.
Like everything's done through an agency, from the logo to like our headshots, like everything. It looks like television. So I really wanted to take that and incorporate it into the podcast. So that's why, like the YouTube channel really is the focus. I just kind of have like the podcast feed de facto just to say it's a podcast, but really it's an interview show that I put up on my YouTube channel,
You really use the strength of video, and I've been doing this for 4 years now, and it's strictly audio. I just haven't gotten into video just because, as you know, there are a lot of complexities involved with that, and you're just adding a whole new layer of, right?
It's so much work. Like, people think, for you and I, it's like, we're broadcasters, right? So it's like, we know, what it takes to create compelling content. But then when you add video into it, and if you're not a video guy, like I get messages all the time from like, other podcasters like, hey, Jeremy, what do you use to, what app do you use to film your podcast? Because it looks great. I'm using StreamYard, and I'm like, no, I'm actually a professional. I don't use, like StreamYard or one of those bullshit apps. Everything's filmed professionally and then edited down like in post-production, and there's actually effort put into it.
Yeah. And, that's where you truly stand out. You're talking earlier about the crowded space that is podcasting right now. And I know it is, but the effort doesn't always seem to be there, and the quality doesn't always seem to be there. It's like the music industry almost. People can record albums in their basements now, but oftentimes, the level of quality has kind of, been brought down a couple rungs. So
somebody tweeted last night, he's another like wannabe podcaster. And I like to have fun with people on Twitter and stuff. Like, I don't take myself serious whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think my humor doesn't come off as humor. Sometimes people think I'm actually being like a prick. So somebody tweeted last night, like, podcasting has become more watered down than glam rock in the late 80s, early 90s.
Oh,
Just because you can have a podcast does not mean that you should have a podcast. And I'm like, pot, meat, kettle.
I saw that. Yeah, that was hilarious. But there's no response.
Well, the guy wrote back, he's like, back at you, brother. I'm like, okay, he's got a sense of humor, but yeah. With the pandemic, everybody's just sitting at home. Even rock stars now are starting their own podcasts and live stream, and they're calling up their rock star buddies. And I'm like, well, no, you're not a journalist. You're not a broadcaster. Like, I'm supposed to be doing the interviews.
Mm-hmm.
And then, because they're now on that podcast, but then everybody else thinks they can get them. And, even a lot of the guests are oversaturating themselves within the podcasting realm,
Yes.
I could name like 3 different people that are just way too out there on every show, and it's not special to have them on your show anymore because they whore themselves out.
It's funny. I was talking to somebody last week about this, that since the pandemic, I've seen bands more than I have, before the pandemic, because everybody's live streaming like crazy now, and it's like they're all over the place. And it's just hit the saturation point where it's almost gone the other way, and you don't want to see them anymore. But
it's like, oh God, them again. Oh, they're so desperate. Like, that's me. I'm sitting at home and I see, so-and-so on Twitter. I'm like, oh, if they went on that podcast, really?
Yeah.
But alas, here we are, 2 podcasters talking shit about other podcasters.
Yeah, talking shit, slinging mud.
Yeah. Sounds like we're backstage at a show.
So we're peas in the same pod, Jeremy. We were introduced by a mutual friend, Ian O'Malley. He knows you. I've known him for a long time. We are both massive Van Halen fans. We definitely have that in common. So on your list here, you've provided your 5 songs that make your skin vibrate. I knew there was going to be a Van Halen tune on there, but let me, as a segue into that list, let me ask you the age-old question of Van Halen fans the world over. Do you know what it is?
Yeah, Michael or Wolfie?
Oh, close. Dave or Sam?
Yeah, Sam or Dave? Well, first of all, they're 2 completely different bands.
Mm-hmm.
But I gravitate towards the Sammy for the songwriting, and gravitate towards Dave for the musicality and the impact.
Mm-hmm. Showmanship.
Yeah, and the showmanship. You can't deny that first record is, to me, the most influential rock record of all time. I don't know if you agree with that or not. Do you?
It's up there. That's a huge category, man. I'm thinking, Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, you got the Zeppelin,
Stones.
you got the Beatles, you got the Stones, you got the Hendrix, stuff like that. But it's like, he created an entire decade of new music.
Yes.
On top of that, he completely changed the way guitars were approached or even thought about and even manufactured.
No question.
There's nobody more impactful than Edward Van Halen when it comes to guitar. Okay, you'll talk about the Jimmy Page and Hendrix and all those guys, but Ed literally changed guitars.
Yes.
I don't know what most people's kind of way of evaluating something like that would be, but for me, it's like the dude just changed everything.
Yeah, no, he totally did. And I think, and this is a kind of hotly debated topic, I think on a larger level than did Jimi Hendrix. A lot of people will say, no, be careful. But I think Edward Van Halen's impact when he came onto the scene was much more significant than Hendrix's impact.
There was just this big discussion on Twitter like last night. There's this guy in like some prog band that said, he wasn't a Van Halen fan because he didn't love the shredder guitar scene. Edward Van Halen wasn't a shred guitar player.
I agree.
Okay, listen, there's a lot of stuff that he did play that was shred, but you listen to the funk stuff from Mean Streets and the guitar solo on that, which is far from shred.
Yeah.
Or Dirty Movies.
Yeah.
There's so much more depth to Edward Van Halen than just like this, cliche, oh, he's the king of shred. I think he was just the king of musicianship because he was just an all-around incredible musician.
Agree. When I think about shred, I think about guys like Warren DeMartini, George Lynch, Yngwie Malmsteen, just a million notes a minute guys, right?
Yeah. I call them wanker guitar players because they're whacking off, seeing how many notes they can hit with like no sense of melody or.
That's right.
I can't stand stuff like that. I love melodic hard rock because it actually has melody to it. And when it does come to the shredders, they actually do have some musicality to it. Great guitar player Steve Brown from Trickster. One of my favorite guitar players. So melodic, but man, his fingers are going 100 miles a minute, but he's still got melody.
Yeah, it's unbelievable what some of those guys can do. But getting back to your point about Van Halen, I think that he plays that quickly, but just it was not for that purpose. You know what I mean? He was just getting into it. You listen to a solo, like say from like Hot for Teacher, for example. He's got a very kind of rhythmic swing aspect to his solos, like ba 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 ba. You know what
I relate that to? I relate that to him being a classically trained pianist because those could easily be translated onto a piano keyboard. And he's often said in interviews that I write all of my stuff on keyboard and then go to the guitar. So
yeah. Well, see, there you go. One of the funniest things I read about Yngwie Malmsteen when he was all the rage was that someone said it's like classical piano lines played through a fuzz box. But
yeah.
You know what I mean? Yngwie Malmsteen, bless the guy, but 5 minutes, I've had enough.
Yeah. Do you know Yngwie Malmsteen almost killed me?
What?
Yeah, I almost got murdered by Yngwie Malmsteen. I was at his concert about over 10 years ago now. I was at Club Soda in Montreal.
Okay.
And he's on stage. He's got his wall of Marshalls, and he's playing his Ferrari Strat. And
yeah.
Now he's throwing guitar picks left and right into the frickin' crowd. Okay.
Okay.
He throws a guitar pick up and he kicks it with his boot.
Oh.
It flew right into my throat.
No way.
I'm not kidding you. Like shoots, he scores. It went right to the back of my throat. I'm choking. I'm like literally choking. I'm like, I didn't even notice. I'm like, what the fuck what is this?
Yeah.
And I finally cough it up, and it's in my hand, and it was an Yngwie Malmsteen guitar pick.
What a bizarre story! What the did he see that? Did he know he did?
No, he didn't see it. But the true story, my buddy Bruce was with me, and I fit it up, and he looked at my hand and looked at me. He's like, "Dude," it was like one of those like Wayne's World moments.
Seriously.
Yeah. So Yngwie Malmsteen almost murdered me.
That is hilarious.
Yeah. But yeah, talking about Sam and Dave, with Sammy, I listed Top of the World as a song on there because I it's just the perfect pop rock song. You listen to that guitar riff that, originates back to Jump, and the production of the song, Sammy's melody and vocal performance, and just everything about it. It sounds like a band playing a badass song.
Yeah.
And Ed playing one of his best less is more guitar solos ever, which going back to him not being a shred guitar player, and just it's a motivational feel-good song. You hear that and the standing on top of the world. Like, it's fun to sing and belt out. And it's just a feel-good rock song. And, the whole point of the podcast, your podcast, your songs that make you, vibrate.
That's right.
That's exactly what that song does.
As you were singing that, like after 1984, I was kind of done with Van Halen. I knew who Sammy Hagar was, obviously, the Red Rocker, all that stuff, Montrose. But for me, it was kind of like an older guy joined Van Halen. Like I was 15 when 1984 came out, and I thought, I kind of like Roth, and I, followed him for a little while till that got too silly. But when I was a kid, Women and Children First was like the first real rock record I heard. I was a huge Kiss fan, but Kiss, the music was always kind of like a little bit formulaic, right? But I remember hearing Women and Children First and thinking, Jesus Christ, like I was 11 years old and I thought, holy shit, like this is crazy. And it was so exciting and all that stuff. So when Sam came into the band, I was like, I don't know. But to your point, a lot of those feel-good songs came later. Top of the World, Dreams, right? In the same era. And good on Van Halen for letting all that stuff out, because maybe, that was not a David Lee Roth thing.
Well, you go from a lyric like, some friends of mine just the other night went to hear this cool cat blow. And it's like, you go to How Do I Know When It's Love?
Yes, exactly.
It's two completely different perspectives on songwriting, and there's a certain maturity that came along with the Sammy lyrics that really complemented the advanced musicality that Edward was exploring at the time. And I just think it was the perfect collaboration because those songs are just so good.
Mm-hmm.
Even Cabo Wabo, as fromage as it may be, like it's still fun, and the lyrics are cool, and the melodies of the guitar playing, and it's just good music, man.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Her down because you said you were 11 when that album came out.
Yes.
So when you're 11 years old and you hear a song like Intruder, how do you react to that?
With wonderment, like it's a jaw dropper. Just thinking like, Jesus, it was, I remember thinking that this was like this kind of monolithic, massive thing on the other side of the speaker, kind of pulling me in, going, come on, there's a lot of stuff going on in here. And it was fascinating to me. That's what it was. I was just fascinated by that. Yeah, it was incredible. I still remember the sensation of it, and that's why that stuff is so important to me,
Well, that's exactly what happened with me when I first saw Van Halen. I think it was like 4 or 5 years old. I was in my Uncle Terrence's bedroom at my Grandma Debbie's house, and he was playing the Van Halen Greatest Hits Volume 1 or whatever it's called. It came in like 96 or something like that.
Right, yeah.
They put out like the VHS with like all the music videos. So we were watching the Jump video, and I remember sitting there, like the fuzziness, like at the beginning of the video, like the yellow lines and stuff, like scrolling up and down the screen, and then like does the splits. And I remember watching this, and I thought, Eddie looked so cool, with his jacket, and he's playing the striped guitar, and and he just looks so happy. And I was like, this is like the coolest guy ever, and that's really where my love for music began, was seeing that Jump music video.
I think that thing was done for like $800 or something too. It was crazy.
Yeah, and Dave directed it.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah,
funny.
He directed all those music videos.
That's hilarious. It was so kind of slapdash. It was great for Van Halen for me, I'd seen the previous videos up to that point. Like, I don't know. I loved it. And Eddie looked so happy in that video. Don't you think?
Happy playing his music.
Yeah.
It would have been weird if, Van Halen did a Thriller style video. I mean, it just wouldn't have made.
Well, Pretty Woman. Remember Pretty Woman, the video for that?
Yeah. Even that's kind of goofy, isn't it?
Oh, it was hilarious. Like you kind of, that gave you a very good idea of where everybody stood in the band at that point. Napoleon, David Lee Roth. It was confusing, but it was hilarious.
Yeah, and Alex Van Halen, like a primitive. But then you see what Dave did later on with his solo videos, like California Girls and stuff, and he just wanted to be a movie star. He just wanted to be so bad.
Yeah, well, at Yankee Rose, he definitely did.
Yeah, a bottle of anything.
To go.
Oh man, Van Halen, man.
Oh, I could talk about Van Halen for hours and hours and hours. Now, you've got 4 other songs here, however.
Yeah.
Your next one is Shania Twain. She's Not Just a Pretty Face.
Yeah, that is a super out there deep cut of a Shania Twain album called Up. There's actually a live performance of that song on her Up Live in Chicago DVD. Talking about Shania, so Mutt Lange is my favorite producer of all time. And if you've watched any of my videos, my interviews or anything, I always somehow get Mutt name dropped of some sorts because I'm constantly waving the Mutt Lange flag. More people need to know. I'm sure he would love it if less people knew about him, but I want everybody to know about him.
Yeah.
So that song to me, first of all, it tells a great story. It's all about women empowerment and showing appreciation and love for all the women in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the song. I think it's the most perfectly produced song of all time. Now, have you listened to the song? Have you ever heard it?
No, I know the record, but like you said, this is a deep cut. I've not heard this song before.
Dude, I'm telling you, it's the best produced song of all time. From songwriting to the production and the arrangement of the song.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most pleasurable sounding mix you've ever heard in your life. The guitar parts are so damn good. I also think that it was one of those songs where producers in Nashville heard it and were listening and said, right, we need to up our production game. Because up at that point, Mutt and Shania had put out Come On Over and The Woman and Me together. And each one of those records, they changed the sonic landscape of what country music was. With The Woman and Me, you had a big song like Any Man of Mine with the Queen, We Will Rock You, drum beat to it and everything. And it was a big sounding rock record, but it was country.
That's right. I remember back then, late 90s, early 2000s, how much of a force Shania was. She popified country, really, right?
Yeah. They did it with The Woman and Me, and then Mutt and Shania, because I asked Shania about this. I interviewed her once, and she said we did what we did on The Woman and Me, so this way we could get the okay from Nashville. And then if we had success with that album, then we'd be free to do whatever we want. Because Mutt actually financed a portion of that album. Record label Mercury wasn't fully they really weren't all that on board, especially, this is Nashville, you don't write your songs, you go to the publishing house and you record other people's songs. What? You write your own? No, only Willie and Johnny can do that. You're a woman? No way, no. So the fact that she went to the head of Mercury and she was like, well, listen, I've actually been, writing some songs with this guy named Mutt Lange. And I think his name was Luke Lewis, the head of Mercury Nashville at the time. And his reaction was, well, that's cool. So he was on board with it, but everybody else wasn't. So Mutt actually had to invest a lot of his money to record that album with her because he believed in her. He believed in it. And he was right to do it because, wow, it literally changed country music.
No kidding. I had no idea.
Yeah, so after that album was a huge success, well, then that gave them the okay, and they were like, see, look, let's take a chance on this. And then, Mutt was like, why can't we make the country version of Thriller? That's what he did with Hysteria and Def Leppard. Let's make the rock version of Thriller. Well, then he did it with Shania on Come On Over. They did the country version of Thriller.
Yeah.
I think is still to this day the greatest selling album from a female artist of all time.
Is it really? I don't doubt it, yeah.
Yeah, Mutt is the only producer within the top 20 biggest selling albums to have 3 or 4 albums within I think it's the 10 or 20. He holds 3. Back in Black, Def Leppard's Hysteria, and Shania Twain's Come On Over. They're 3 of the biggest selling albums of all time.
Yeah, wow.
But with Come On Over, like I was saying, they just completely changed it again. Even the sonic, the sound of the records that came after that, you listen to Faith Hill, and actually the guitar player on Shania Twain's Come On Over, his name is Dan Huff, who used to be a session guitar player. He played, the Michael Jackson stuff, Whitney Houston stuff. He was in a band called Giant.
Yeah. He
was one of the session players on that album. And Mutt said to him, hey, you really should look at getting into producing because, you approach your guitar parts very much like a producer. And he went on to produce, like Lone Star. He went on to produce, Faith Hill. So all those and all those albums that came after Shania's Come On Over, they sounded very similar because everybody was trying to sound like Shania.
Not bad for a girl from Timmins.
Not bad. And then they changed it all over again with Up. Sorry, I know I'm rambling on about Shania, but this is stuff people need to know. They need to know the impact that Shania and Mutt Lange had on the music scene. Because they did it again on Up, where it's a super robotic computer album. But that also made Nashville realize, okay, you know what? Maybe we don't necessarily need a live drummer, and we could start doing things more in the box. And if you listen to Shania's Come On Over, Mutt's engineer, they programmed the drums on that album just like they did on Hysteria. And the cool thing about it is that they use real sounding drum samples. They're all original sounds. Listen to it and it sounds like an actual performance of a drummer. And the quality, everything just sounds so pleasurable to the drums. Yeah. And they sound huge and they sound fat. Country producers heard that and labels were like, shit, we really need to up the ante here. And ever since then, every country album since has sounded like Shania's Up album.
I think Shania should be paying you a royalty Jeremy.
I need to get her back on. I need to get her on my podcast for a proper interview because
If she hears this, she's going to be calling you.
Well, let me make one quick point before we move on. Talking about Mutt and Shania and how country music sounds just like the records. If you go listen to the new Lady Antebellum, Lady A, they changed their name. The last one's Grace.
Yeah.
So you listen to their song Champagne Night, and it's the best Def Leppard song on country radio right now. Literally, the Pour Some Sugar on Me rhythm and chords with a different melody.
Oh.
Dude, it's Def Leppard.
I don't know what to think of that, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's kind of sad. But.
Well, it is what it is, right?
I don't know where that line is, but oh well. We were fortunate that we were young when, Def Leppard, it's a good segue into your next tune, Def Leppard, Armageddon It, when this stuff was going on. Like, this was our music. This was my music. Hysteria, I listened to, every day. Loved it. Great pick here.
I just love that song because of how fun it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, first of all, it's Bang a Gong.
Yes. Yeah.
And Joe's, vocal performance on the song is just so good. He's not singing, but he's not talking. It's kind of like a really cool combo, and he's kind of like really in the mic, and you better come inside when you get no chance. Like, it's a cool vocal performance.
Yeah.
Like, I almost feel like that chorus wasn't a part of that song. Like, it was something else, and then Mutt was like, right, we should take the chorus from that and put it onto this. And once again, it's the perfect song, That could be, eh? I was just kind of thinking that, listening to this song in my head, and you might be right. Yeah. That might be a little cut and paster. It's one of those great songs where it has the key change in the chorus. Yes. I love that modulation. Yes. So in that song, I love it there, and there's two more songs that I love that have the key change. Bryan Adams' One Night Love Affair, and Everybody's Working for the Weekend, Loverboy. They all go up to that D. Ah. Wow. There's so many of those great songs that have that modulation just at the right, precise time. That's perfect. That's a great producer, that can see that, hey, we should do that. Yes, absolutely. That's just great songwriting. You're right. Speaking of Phil Collen, Def Leppard, Phil Collen has been on this show, thankfully. He's like just a super nice guy, nicest guy in rock and roll. And he told me that Mutt was the guy who actually taught him to play properly in time with a band, like taught him to be a musician, not just a flashy fleet finger guitar player, just like a shredder. Wanker. Yeah, a wanker. Yeah. 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 So Mutt said, okay, so play along with the drums. Here's the 2, here's the 4. So, and he would slow down to kind of add a little bit more, rhythmic sensibility to his playing. Well, I'll tell you a funny story. So I interviewed Randall Waller, who was Shania Twain's touring guitar player for the big 2 tours, Come On Over and Up. And he was saying that when he first got into the band, there's a song called Man, I Feel Like a Woman. Everybody knows it, right? Mm-hmm. So the rhythm guitar part goes, ban dan 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 dan. Now, as a guitar player, normally, you'd go with your first and second fingers, plucking strings, and then you'd use your thumb to hit that G note. Okay. Mutt said to me, "Oh, Randall, listen, when you use your thumb, the tip of the thumb isn't as strong as the tip of your first finger, and if you don't use the first finger to pull the note, it's going to be a little bit 5 heavy. Wow. You want it to be, really powerful. You want to feel and hear that G. So can you just pluck it?" So Randall literally had to use his 2 fingers and then jump over to the E to hit the G with his first finger and then go back to the chord. Wow. Mutt has these such bionic ears. He was telling me the story. It's on my podcast. The video's on my YouTube channel. He was saying that he was just tired. They would go 12-hour days rehearsing for 3 months straight, the entire set. And he's like, one day I was just tired. I was exhausted. And Mutt's sitting there, he's got his monitors, his eyes are closed, he's listening, or he's reading his book. And he's like, I just got tired, and I happened to, go back to my thumb. And he's like, I'm standing there playing, Mutt's sitting there. All of a sudden, Mutt, sits up in his chair, something happened. And he's looking around at the band. And he's like, mind you, this is the full band playing, in the studio, loud as shit. And Mutt looks over to me, and he points at me. And I realized I was using my thumb again. And he's like, oh, I jumped back to my fingers, and he gave me the thumbs up and kind of smiled and went back to his book. Wow. Nothing escapes the man. He's just so detail-oriented. He could hear the difference between your first finger and your thumb. That's crazy. And that's just mind-blowing to me, Phil saying that, he really taught him how to play guitar. Phil and I were talking about that, how they were really playing everything to a click, playing everything had to be perfectly in time.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with like production stuff at that point, a lot of bands are doing dance remixes and stuff. I talked to Steve Stevens about that. He was saying that, they kind of took the Def Leppard Mutt Lange approach to their songs because they wanted to be able to, take the tape and, make dance remixes and stuff and everything. If nothing was recorded to a click or on the grid, it wouldn't have been possible because your guitar part would have been cut halfway through like the last note or something. And so there really is a method to the madness.
Yeah.
This has turned into the Mutt Lange Shania Twain podcast.
Well, your next tune, Kiss Unholy, does Mutt Lange have anything to do with that? I know Shania doesn't.
No, none at all.
All right.
None whatsoever. I threw that Kiss song in because we need a little bit of Kiss on that list. One of my favorite bands of all time. So, yeah, that song comes off the Revenge album. And I just thought it was a great song because it was a bit of departure for the band after the whole glam of the late 80s. They were doing the power ballads like Forever and Tears Are Falling and into the 90s where, grunge was starting to happen. Music was starting to get a little heavier. It was kind of like the beginning of toxic masculinity again, where every guy had to be, with their beard and their flannel, like, I'm a fucking man. I ain't no fucking pussy wearing spandex and makeup, that was one of the other terrible things about the 90s. It was the birth of toxic masculinity. That song, I think it's great because it really is representative of the time because it's Gene singing in this really cool growly voice. And it's a really heavy riff, and the drums are just like a locomotive and big sing-along chorus. It's just the perfect rock song.
Yeah. Funny, when I saw this pick, I thought, wow, Kiss songs like Unholy is a unique pick. But, I think about Revenge in the same way that I think about Creatures of the Night, in that it was almost like a pendulum swing back the other way after an album like The Elder, and then Hot in the Shade, I think was the album before this one. So it's almost like, they sat down and said, hey man, we gotta turn it around a little bit. And they went way back the other way.
Kiss, they were doing really bad business at the time. Gene, so MIA, just trying to be a Hollywood movie star. They were playing to half-filled arenas. Paul Stanley talks about it in his book. He's like, we really didn't think that we were going to make it past, the Hot in the Shade tour.
Yeah.
And when they got Bob Ezrin back on board to produce, and they did a 360, man.
That had to be challenging. I've had this conversation before about 70s bands trying to stay relevant in the 80s. And that had to be tough. Think about all those bands, Jeremy, right from Alice Cooper to Fleetwood Mac to Heart, Cheap Trick. There's so many of them, right? And they must have been terrified.
Yeah. Well, even Aerosmith, they were gone.
Yeah.
And then Pump comes around and, the Permanent Vacation. It was almost like as if they were a fresh new band.
Yeah. They were a completely new band. They were completely different in my mind.
And even Alice Cooper. Alice Cooper band sounds completely different from Trash.
Well, yeah, those days were completely different. I felt like, when the 80s came, he went through that little bit of a weird period with Zipper Catches Skin and Flush the Fashion and that sort of thing. I think he was going through some issues. In the 80s, he tried to get some traction with what was coming out, that Friday the 13th tune, Constrictor. And then he
what was that song called? He's the man behind the mask.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I just thought, this is not you, Alice. This is not you at all. Please, dude, come on. And
it
then
has that weird. It's like.
I know the whole thing. Yeah, but then Poison came out. I think Slash played on some of that record, and he found his groove finally. It took him a little while, but like the 80s obviously had a huge impact on him. Not necessarily a good one.
You listen to a song like Feed My Frankenstein, and that's still a staple in the Alice Cooper live set, and it's a damn great song. So I think just at the end of the day, a great song's a great song, right? And on Feed My Frankenstein, I don't know if it was Steve Vai or Joe Satriani. One of them played guitar on that. And I think Nikki Sixx is credited as a co-writer.
Really?
Yeah. So listen to that bass line. Don't. It almost has like a Dr. Feelgood kind of vibe to it.
Yeah. That was Wayne's World soundtrack, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I like that tune. All right, you've got one more here, sir. It's Bryan Adams and another deep cut, Don't Drop That Bomb on Me. I think this is 91, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the album Waking Up the Neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
That's another Mutt Lange song.
Oh.
Yeah, that was another, that was produced by Mutt Lange, that album. I say that song, Don't Drop That Bomb on Me by Bryan Adams, is the best song Def Leppard never recorded. Because the chorus is so Def Leppard, don't drop that bomb on me. Like, it's super Def Leppard. Even like the same drum sounds as Hysteria.
Yeah.
It's the same guitar sounds. It's Def Leppard. You know, the only difference is that Joe Elliott wasn't singing.
That's so funny. That's the Mutt Lange brand at that point, I guess, which is kind of funny because you think about Back in Black and how much of a spare record that was in terms of, you know, there wasn't a lot going on. There was a lot of space, which I love about the record. And then you've got all this crazy multi-tracking on albums like Hysteria. And I'm not super familiar with this Adams tune, but it sounds like it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the last song on Waking Up the Neighbors. And if you go listen to it after we're done here, like you're going to text me right away and be like, Def Leppard throwaway, 1,000%.
I'll check it out.
Brutalize came out at the same time as like that album, and it's like, you know, you hear that song and then you go listen to you know, Make Love Like a Man or something. Like, it's the same tone, it's the same sound of the albums, you know.
Yeah, I could see that actually.
So you can see the correlation though between all the songs I listed. They're all really well produced songs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you put that on and it sounds pleasurable to the ear, you know. It's not like screaming vocals, and just the production of it, the mixes. You know, the drums and the bass are just so perfectly, you know, leveled with each other, and the guitars and everything. Like, I'm just a fan of big production, and not to say I don't appreciate, you know, like Back in Black, because I do. It's one of my favorite albums of all time, but I'm just a fan of what they did with the technology, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You listen to that and it just sounds so big, and it's almost mind-boggling how they were able to do that in the tape days, you know. So it's the production is almost as inspiring to me as the album and the music itself, you know.
Well, you know, I love what you've done here with this because it's very insightful. And I feel like people sometimes don't get that granular when they think about music and listen to music. And I love when people dig in the way that you were doing, and it compels you to listen a little bit more closely. Yeah,
because I'm on Top 40 radio, right? And I'm exposed to the biggest pop songs in the world on a daily basis. You know, I was almost going to throw like a Katy Perry or a Maroon 5 or a Lady Gaga on the list for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, talking about, you know, the interviews and stuff I do on the podcast, it's not like I'm just so used to doing. So what are you watching on Netflix right now? Oh, did you bake bread while stuck in isolation? You know, what's it like sitting at home? Like, you know, like all those like stereotypical bullshit pop culture, pop radio questions that, you know, these artists get asked from every single interviewer in every city that they do an interview with. Yeah. You know, I was interviewing David Guetta, okay? Like, he's one of the biggest DJ, you know, I'm sure you know who David Guetta is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did an interview with him for the radio station. I asked him a question, and my program director got pissed at me. Because his whole rationale is that, oh, you know, our audience doesn't care about that stuff. You know, they just want to know, you know, oh, what's it like, you know, working with Sia on the song, or, you know, oh, what are you watching? And, you know, stuff that's relatable to them to humanize them with their audience. And I'm like, well, first of all, you know, so-and-so woman, 40 years old that listens to the radio station isn't going out of her way to go on YouTube and watch an interview with David Guetta. That's my first point.
Right.
Second of all, she didn't give two shits if David Guetta has baked bread while in isolation or not. If you're watching a David Guetta interview, you're probably A, already a David Guetta fan, and B, a fan of his music, and C, you're probably a DJ or a producer and you want to learn from the guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I asked him a question, but I composed my question in a way that allowed him to get his, you know, prepared, you know, one sheet answer for the song. But I straight up asked him, I was like, you know, David Guetta, you're one of the biggest DJs and producers in the world, and you're working with Sia on this song. Talk to me about how you approach producing a song for the radio. You know, talking about the sonic landscape. You know, obviously the song starts on the piano with Sia, and then she brings it to you to produce. But how do you decide, okay, I'm going to use, you know, an Oberheim keyboard on this, or I'm going to use a Linn drum? You know, how do you decide how you're going to produce this song? And the first thing he said, he was like, well, first of all, I'm very impressed that you know what an Oberheim is, because I think you're the first interviewer that's ever known what that is.
That's great.
And then, yeah. And so he was very complimentary. And then he went on and did the sales pitches. Like, you know, I see what the song needs, you know, if it needs this or it needs that. And he was still able to give me his, you know, his prepared answer. But, you know, we got a little bit more in depth with it, which is great. But it was also interesting to him because it wasn't something that he's necessarily asked all the time. And that's exciting, you know. If you're asked the same question every interview you do, it gets boring. So I like to bring a little bit more to the table, you know?
See, to me, you added a cerebral context, right? Clearly he was impressed by that, and clearly he was happy that you did. And I think that stuff like that is important, because those same old cookie cutter questions are just so dull. And it's, you know what though, Jeremy, you know, it's like classic rock radio, right? It's like Led Zeppelin rock and roll and Black Dog and Stairway to Heaven instead of, you know, Out on the Tiles and Black Country Woman. It's like you're just feeding people what you think they want to hear without really knowing. And I mean, I think on the other side, people are kind of eating it up too. And I don't know why that is, but what about something a little different, you know?
Well, you know, it's funny, like at the radio station, you know, every single song we play on the air is tested, goes through a focus group, you know, this and that, you know, everything has to be proven, like it's going to be a winning hit on the radio. You know, we've come to see that, you know, the audience doesn't really, know who's singing it or really care who's singing it. As long as they can vibe to it and it makes them feel good while they're sitting in their cubicle or driving to wherever they need to go, that's all that matters to them. You know, if it happens to be Shawn Mendes, great. If it happens to be AC/DC, awesome. A good song is just a good song at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just hate when people overanalyze it.
You're a modern day Johnny Fever. I knew that guys like you were still out there.
We're still around.
You give me faith, Jeremy White.
Oh, I'm trying.
Listen, man, this was a lot of fun for me. I really appreciate you taking the time. This is a fun, laid back, cool chat. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Do I sound like somebody you want to grab a beer with?
Oh, we're definitely grabbing a beer. We're doing that for sure. When this is all over, I'm coming to Montreal. We're going to listen to tunes and we're going to grab beers.
Yeah. We'll get Ian to come on, drive on up too. And,
oh yeah, we'll get him up here. Well, listen, man, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll have to come back on when I put my album out this summer.
I was going to say, I want you to come back on 5 more tunes, and we'll talk about your new record when it comes out.
Yep, I'm all in.
All right. Thank you very much, and continued success with the podcast. Really great job, man.
Well, I appreciate it, man. And, you know, go subscribe to my YouTube channel. That's where all the videos are. But the cool thing about the YouTube is that it's not just like the interviews. Like I'm putting like covers and I, you know, talk about my guitar gear and stuff like that. So it's not just the podcast, which is the cool thing about the YouTube channel. So
yeah. All right, Jeremy White, thank you very much. I will be in touch. I'll send you a text, man.
All right, appreciate it, Brent. This was great. Good interview. Thank you for this. This is a fantastic chat. Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. All right.
Thank you.
I'll talk to you soon, brother. Thanks, man.
All right, we'll talk later. Peace.
All right, this has been No Sleep Till Sudbury with Brent Jensen and my very special guest, Mr. Jeremy White. Till next time, folks, take good care.
Brent Jensen is the best-selling author of No Sleep Till Sudbury, Leftover People, and All My Favorite People Are Broken. All titles available in stores and on Amazon worldwide.